pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Colonel Kim Campbell. Colonel Campbell is the chair of Airpower Innovation and Integration within the Department of Military and Strategic Studies at the United States Air Force Academy. She was commissioned in 1997 as a distinguished graduate of the Air Force Academy. She is a Marshall Scholar with 2 master's degrees, 1 in Business Administration and 1 in International Security Studies. Colonel Campbell is qualified as an instructor pilot and flight examiner in the A-10. Her operational assignments include duty as Flight Commander, A-10 Test Program Manager, and Division Commander, Director of Operations, Squadron Commander, and Group Commander. She has also served as Air Force Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council and as Military Assistant to the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. In addition to all that, she is a command pilot with over 1,700 hours in the A-10, including 375 combat hours. She has flown combat missions in Operation Southern Watch, Enduring Freedom, and Iraqi Freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and a privilege to present to you Colonel Kim Campbell.
As an A-10 fighter pilot, I've flown thousands of hours in a fighter jet and over 100 missions in combat. And the one thing I can tell you from all of those missions, nothing ever goes exactly as planned. Just when you think you have a solid plan of action, something happens that requires you to adjust and make changes. And if we're leading that formation, then we need to be able to lead our team to mission success. We need to be able to adapt and evolve so that when we are faced with the unexpected, we can respond. Now it's Monday, April 7th, 2003, Baghdad, Iraq. Operation Iraqi Freedom has been underway for about 3 weeks. I'm an A-10 pilot assigned to the 75th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron. And on this day, like every day of my deployment, I'm meticulously planning to support our troops on the ground. But on this day, that preparation really pays off. We are assigned to fly up to Baghdad, air refuel, and then wait in the stack to hold. The situation on the ground is so intense that there are literally aircraft stacked up around Baghdad, waiting for the call. Unfortunately, the weather today is terrible. We can't see the ground below, and we really don't know if we're going to be able to make an impact. But we have to be prepared for an unknown mission, unknown conditions, and unknown circumstances. It turns out we don't have to wait long. As we're waiting in the stack, over the radio, we hear a frantic call. Yard 05, this is Advance 3-3. We're taking fire. We need immediate assistance. We are troops in contact. The hair on the back of my neck stands up. Troops in contact means that our troops are taking fire. They need our help, they need it now, and we are going to take risks to get in there and get the job done. While our ground controller tells us that we have enemy, we have friendlies, we have enemy all in the same location. Our friendlies are on the west side of the Tigris River. They're firing rocket-propelled grenades into our guys. Friendlies are on the west side, enemies on the east side, and there's a firefight going back and forth. I can't see the ground below, so I'm simply plotting this information on my map. My flight lead decides that we're going to fly over to the target location. We'll get right over the top, and then we'll look for a way through. He dives down below the weather first, and then it's my turn. I start my spiral down below the weather, looking for a way to see the ground below, and I slowly start to see the ground pop up. I pop out below the clouds, and I can see the bridge, the North Baghdad Bridge. That's the target we're given, but the plan is to get underneath that bridge, to take out the enemy, to take out the Iraqi Republican Guard. As I pop down below the weather, we are so low that I can actually see this firefight happening back and forth across the river. I can see rocket-propelled grenades. I see smoke and flashes. And then at about that same time, I start to see puffs, gray and white smoke. This time it's around my cockpit. Bright flashes. And it's at this moment that I realize not only is there this firefight across the ground, but they're shooting at us too. But we're gonna get in there as quickly as we can. We use gun and rockets on the enemy location. My flight lead goes first, and then it's my turn. I check my distance from my target, I check my altitude, and I check that all my switches are set correctly. And then I roll in. I get my nose right underneath that bridge, hit the pickle button, our weapons release button, and instantly, 7 rockets come off the airplane. But now it's time to climb up. I've got to get my energy back. I'm making my turns to get up my altitude, and then boom. I'm rocked in the cockpit as I feel and hear a loud explosion at the back of the airplane. I'm hit. The jet noses over, and I can see Baghdad below. I pull back on the stick, nothing. It's not responding to any of my control inputs. The ground is now getting closer, and I know that I might have to eject. But I don't want to eject into the hands of the enemy. I quickly try to analyze the situation. Master caution light, hydraulic lights, hydraulic gauges. They're at 0. The system is empty. It is completely depleted. Well, I don't want to eject. I look down at the ejection handles, not yet. I don't want to eject into the hands of the enemy, and so I decide that I'm going to make every second count. I set aside my fear, I regain my composure, and I engage our backup emergency system. The airplane starts to climb out and away from Baghdad. And that is the first moment that I think I may make it out of this situation alive. Now, when my airplane was hit, I didn't have time to ask for help. I didn't have time to open a checklist. I just had to react. And thankfully, my training kicked in. I was able to respond and react in that unknown situation, that highly unexpected situation. But now that the airplane is flying, my first priority is I want out of Baghdad. And so I start maneuvering south to get out of the city. And then AAA, anti-aircraft artillery, starts coming up from everywhere. Amazingly, we make it out of Baghdad and above the weather with no further battle damage. You see, I think I still might have to eject. And I know that if I can eject outside of Baghdad, that my chances of survival and escape will be much better. Well, now that we're out of Baghdad, my flight lead decides that he needs to pull up alongside of me and do a battle damage check. Essentially, a look over the airplane just to see the damage. So he pulls up next to me and says, "Casey, you've got hundreds of holes in the fuselage and tail, and a hole about the size of a football in that right horizontal stabilizer." I didn't know what to expect. It doesn't sound good, and quite honestly, I'm shocked and amazed that this airplane is still flying. It's a true testament to the durability of the A-10 that it can take that much damage and still keep flying. It turns out that a missile had hit the back tail section of my airplane, that right horizontal stabilizer. It sent shrapnel into the airplane, into the fuselage and tail, damaging my flight control systems and causing me to go into a backup system called manual reversion. The A-10 is actually built to take hits. It's built so that if you lose one system, then the other will take over. And if you lose both systems, we have a backup system called manual reversion. The thing is, I know I have a decision to make. Because of this backup system, I know that I can fly the airplane to friendly territory and eject, or I can fly it back to friendly territory and attempt to land. It's a tough decision. It weighs heavily on me because I feel like it potentially has the difference between life and death. You see, we don't actually train very often in manual reversion. We do it once during our initial training, just so that we know how the jet will respond, how it will fly. And manual reversion landings, not something we practice at all. In fact, the checklist for manual reversion landings says to attempt under ideal conditions only. Now, I honestly have no idea how you can get to ideal conditions when you're in manual reversion, but that's what the checklist says. So I know I have a decision to make. How do I get there? How do I get to that decision and feel confident in my decision? There's part of me, if I'm completely honest, it'd be a whole lot easier if my flight lead just made the decision for me, right? That's the easy way. If he just tells me what to do. He doesn't. He empowers me to make the decision. He says, KC, it's a single-seat fighter. You make the decision, and I will back you up. I will have your back no matter what happens. It's empowering. It's slightly terrifying. But he had confidence in me. He had confidence in me because I had come to that cockpit prepared. I had the training. We had talked about this type of situation, and he had confidence in me. He empowered me to make that decision, and you know what? Now I had confidence in myself. We want our team to feel empowered to make decisions, to feel confident in their decisions. But to do that, we as leaders need to have the courage to empower our team to make those decisions. Was there risk involved? Absolutely. But we want our team to take smart risk. We need to evaluate the consequences, know the pros and cons, and think about the decision all the way through. Yes, there was risk involved in trying to land my airplane, but I was confident that I could land the airplane. I was confident because I had a very experienced flight lead with me who was providing me with mutual support. I was confident because I had come prepared. It also so happens that the winds are down the runway back at our home base, and I have an hour to fly this airplane to figure it out and make my decision. I'm also keenly aware that there were 3 attempts at manual reversion landings during Desert Storm. And unfortunately, not all of them were successful. One pilot was killed when he crossed the landing threshold. His airplane cartwheeled down the runway. Another pilot made it to the landing, only to find out he had no brakes and steering, swerved on and off the runway several times. He survived. The airplane was destroyed. But there was one situation very similar to mine. So there was this glimmer of hope. His damage very similar to mine, and he was able to land the airplane successfully. Now, these pilots weren't with me that day over Baghdad, but their stories were, and I knew about their stories. You see, when we share stories and experiences, the good, the bad, our mistakes, we help others to be better. So although they weren't with me, their stories were, and I remembered them when I needed it most. Now, I will still tell you that trip back to base was one of the longest hours of my life. I didn't know what was going to happen when I attempted to land. Would the airplane make it back? Would I crash? Would I even survive? I didn't know. But I had to push those thoughts out of my mind and just focus on the task at hand. Not only was flying back mentally exhausting, it was physically exhausting as well. You see, I had emergency jettisoned everything off that airplane, except for an electronic countermeasure pod on the left wing that happens to be both classified and expensive, so it is hardwired to the airplane. And so every time I would let go of the stick, the airplane constantly wanted to roll to the left. Now again, I had the experiences with me of guys who had flown in manual reversion before. And they said, you gotta fly with both hands on the stick. Fly with the right hand, then the left hand, so you're not exhausted when it comes time to land. I knew about their stories. I knew about their experiences. And that helped me in those difficult times. You see, flying in manual reversion, people compare it to driving a dump truck or a semi-truck without power steering. I haven't done either, so I don't know if it's true, but I can tell you it was very difficult to fly. It was mentally and physically challenging. But I had a lot of factors going my way. I was aware of those experiences, the people that had come before me, the people that had sacrificed before me. I learned from them. And I had a very experienced flight lead with me. And so we elect to continue with the approach. We cross into friendly territory. We do a controllability check to make sure that the airplane is flying fine, to understand that even at a slower airspeed, it actually starts flying pretty well. We contact the tower controllers and the supervisor of flying to let them know that we are on our way in. They tell us that the helicopters are on alert, that the crash recovery team is there waiting. I don't want to use either, but it's really reassuring to know that they're there, to know that there is an entire team at home waiting to provide me support. And so we elect to continue the final approach. Now, all this time, my flight lead has made all the radio calls, done all the coordination, and all I have to do is fly. And that's about all I can do. But as we come in on that final approach, I have to make my first radio call. And for the pilots in the room, and for those that are interested in being pilots, there's a couple things about being a pilot that you really want to do. You want to sound good on the radio, right? Calm and controlled. And so I am just adamant that I am going to sound calm and controlled on my one and only radio call. And I probably practiced it. Who knows? I probably said it to myself a few times. But I want to convince everyone, including myself, that I am calm and controlled and that I got this. Yard 06, emergency, gear down, full stop. And I elect continue with my final approach. 60 feet to go, and the airplane quickly rolls to the left. Is it going to crash? Do I even have time to eject? I quickly yank the stick back and the airplane levels out. 30 feet to go. Please let me make it. 10 feet, main gear, nose gear, and the airplane is on the ground. I take a huge breath. I'm incredibly relieved to be back on the ground. The fire trucks are rolling at me, and I finally bring the airplane to a stop. I'm incredibly relieved, that's probably a bit of an understatement, to be back on the ground with my team, with my guys. And I will tell you that it was probably the best landing that I have ever done. At least it felt that way. My cadets that have seen the video might critique it, but that's okay. On the ground, safe landing. The best part, though, was hearing the guys from my squadron on the radio. They were standing by in their jets, waiting to launch, waiting for me to return, and hearing them say, Welcome home, KC. Awesome job. I'll never forget the words of encouragement that I heard from them that day. Well, now that I got the airplane stopped, right, I'm ready to hop out and see the extent of this damage. I could not see the damage. Even we have mirrors in our cockpit. I couldn't see what had happened, so I only knew what my flight lead had told me. So I hop out of the airplane to take a look. I'm surprised by the damage, but I'm also surprised by the number of people that are out on the runway, that are on the ramp, waiting for me to return. My entire team, during these moments of flying back during that hour, had heard about the battle damage and heard that we were on our way home. And they lined the runways, they lined the ramps, waiting to welcome me home. They were also pretty interested to see the damage as well. So you can see in this picture, we think, it was never confirmed, but that a missile hit that right horizontal stabilizer, sent shrapnel into the fuselage and tail, and sheared both the right and left hydraulic lines where they come together at the back of the airplane. It's the one place where we're more vulnerable. Like I said, the airplane is built to take hits. Our systems are separated, but that back tail section is where our hydraulic lines come together. This picture here shows, again, that right horizontal stabilizer and then the tail. That dark spot is honeycomb, the undersection of the airplane. We're not actually supposed to see it, but it turns out that as I was flying back, pieces of the tail were coming off. My flight lead never told me this. I'm very thankful for that. And again, it's just the amount of damage that this airplane can take. We think the missile hit in that location that you can see there, and unfortunately, we never saw it coming. This is the number 2 engine, the right engine. I had no idea that the engine took shrapnel hits as well. Thing about A-10 engines, there's 2 of them, which is a good thing. But it literally spit that shrapnel up, chewed it up, and spit it out. I had no indications of any engine problems. Although my flight lead, multiple times on the way home, said, "Hey, KC, how's that number 2 engine doing?" And I kept thinking, why are you asking me about my engine? I have a hydraulic problem. And again, being that awesome flight lead that he was, figured out what I needed to know to fly the airplane and what was worth waiting for me to know once I got back. This picture here is the back tail of the airplane. At some point, there was a fire. I didn't know about it. We think it probably happened when the missile impacted and the hydraulic fluid dumped out of the airplane, creating a fire. It put itself out. Again, true testament to the durability of this airplane, that it can help get me home safely with this amount of damage. Fast on the clicker here. But it wasn't just the airplane that helped me get home safely. Like I said, I had a very experienced flight lead with me, providing me with mutual support. We talk a lot about the Wingman Concept. Well, this is it. He knew my strengths and my weaknesses. He supported me and empowered me and provided guidance when I needed it most. He empowered me to make a decision and then had my back, no matter what. He gave me confidence that I could land this airplane. The other members of my team were my crew chiefs. Now they were back at home base waiting for me to return. Senior Airman Randy Andrus, now Master Sergeant Randy Andrus, and Staff Sergeant Ian Morris. We put an incredible amount of trust in our maintenance teams. And they do incredible work because they don't want to let us down. These guys made sure that my airplane could fly under any circumstances, even after extensive battle damage. The first person that I wanted to see after I landed was my crew chief. I couldn't taxi my airplane there. I had to leave it on the runway, so I got a ride in the car over to my parking spot. And the whole way over, I am trying to come up with what am I going to say to my crew chief. Sorry, Ian, I just destroyed your airplane. Hope it's okay. I hop out of the car, I look up at Ian, and he has the biggest smile on his face. I don't have to say a word. He just says, "Ma'am, welcome home." It's amazing what happens when you put trust in your team, what you can accomplish. Together, we were able to overcome a really difficult situation. And I absolutely could not have done it without them. I will tell you that that mission, those moments, that 24 hours was incredibly challenging. That situation pushed me to my limits. It pushed me outside my comfort zone. But it was a defining moment in my life because it showed me what I was capable of doing. I got to see firsthand what it means to be part of a team that can have a leader that inspires and motivates them in difficult times, that will empower them to make decisions, and also to see the impact that a team like that can have. Now, as leaders, if we want to create a successful, high-performing team, then I think there are a couple things that we need to do. And that mission set the stage for me for the rest of my career. Those experiences of being part of a high-performing team and seeing how it works and seeing the impact that we made in Iraq, that stayed with me. Whether I was leading a 2-ship, a 4-ship, a squadron, or a group, I understood what it was to be a leader of a high-performing team. And if we want that in our organizations, then I think we need to practice both vulnerable and accountable leadership. The very first thing we need to do as leaders is establish trust with our team. And I think we establish trust by being vulnerable, by being open to new ideas, by being open to risk and uncertainty. Now, I get it. Vulnerability in leadership maybe sounds a little counterintuitive. Vulnerability in leadership for a fighter pilot sounded a little counterintuitive as well. But here's the deal. Vulnerability isn't about weakness. It's about being open to uncertainty, about being open to risk. It's about admitting that you don't have all the answers and then asking your team for ideas. It's about making a mistake or a bad decision and then stepping up to own it. It's not weakness. And if you don't believe me, go read books by Dr. Brené Brown, who has studied vulnerability for decades. I can only tell you what I've done in practice, but it works. Vulnerability in leadership creates an environment where your team will be more creative and more innovative. But it's not easy. And just a few years ago, I was in charge of a team of over 1,600 personnel throughout South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. Different missions all over the area of responsibility. And I had to earn their trust. As a new commander, I had to earn their trust and get to know what they did. The majority of my airmen in Honduras, or a good majority of them, were firefighters. And I thought, well, I need to get to know what they do. I need to understand. So if we're going to make decisions about their equipment and what they do, what risk we're going to let them take, then I need to get to know them. So I asked them, how can I get to learn what you do on a daily basis? They said, "Man, we've got a great idea for you. You can come suit up in a fire suit and then go in the burn house with us to fight a fire." All right, part of me is incredibly excited and part of me is also terrified. Why? Because I'm a combat-proven fighter pilot and I don't want to look like an idiot. I don't want to do something stupid in front of my airmen. I don't want to make a mistake. But I got to set aside that ego and just be a student. And so I take the time, I learn from my firefighters. They teach me how to put on the burn suit, the fire suit, and what we're going to do in the burn house with the fire hose. And then they sound the alarm, and we run out to the fire trucks. We get our suits on, and I'm sure I'm dead last. I mean, they're much faster than me. But we hop in the truck, go out to the burn house. They let me lead in. And after about 15 minutes, we put the fire out. And I come out of the burn house, and first off, the heat is exhilarating. But I am totally exhausted. and it's been 15 minutes. And my firefighters do this for hours, for days. I'm exhausted, I am drenched in sweat. I'm sure my heart rate is through the roof because of the adrenaline. But in those moments, I got to know my team. I got to connect with my team in a way that a PowerPoint briefing or a presentation ever would. I got to know them, I understood what they went through, and I connected with my team. Vulnerability in leadership can be challenging. It can be intimidating, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. Over time, I got to know my airmen throughout the AOR, throughout the area of responsibility, and they trusted me. They brought ideas to me about ways to improve our organization. In fact, some of the best ideas came from the lower levels of the organization. Sometimes our ideas do come from the lower levels, but we have to create that environment and establish trust so they're willing to bring those ideas forward. Vulnerable leadership inspires loyalty, it creates greater connections with your team, and enables your team to perform at the best. We just have to be willing to do it. Now, once we establish that trust, the other key piece to creating high-performing teams is that we need to create an environment where our team feels safe to take smart risk, to get outside their comfort zone, and to fail. But to fail forward, to learn from those experiences. And I saw this firsthand when I was part of a team that was developing and testing new software in the A10. My task as the lead for the A10 test team was to bring the A10 out of 1970s technology to state-of-the-art precision weapons. Kind of like transitioning from a rotary phone, and I know most of the cadets don't even know what that is, to a new smartphone. And it was tough. It was tough because most of us in the A10 community had been doing things one way for so long, and we were good at it. Why change, right? So there was resistance to that change. But it turns out that we could be more efficient and more effective with the new technology. So my job was to develop these tactics, techniques, and procedures and get the entire A10 community to move to a new way of doing business. I had a fantastic team. We trusted each other, we knew each other, and we knew there would be failures along the way. We weren't always going to get it right. But failures are hard. And I happened to be the lead of a mission where we had a pretty significant failure. You see, we were testing new weapons, air-to-air weapons on the A10, and we had to change the software and some of the ways that we did business. We thought we had everything in place, all the preliminary tests had gone well, and so we brought our entire team from Las Vegas, from Nellis Air Force Base, out to Florida. And we were going to shoot air-to-air missiles at full-size drones. We had analysts lined up waiting to go with the latest technology to watch this test. We took off uneventfully. We rejoined with the drones. I was leading the mission. Beautiful blue sky, the sun is out, and I have this awesome drone in the center of my heads-up display, which is a pretty good feeling because now I'm about to shoot it down. I'm completely lined up, everything is ready to go. I hit the pickle button, our weapons release button. Nothing. Absolutely nothing happens. All those people, all that money, all that testing, and the missile stayed on the rail. It was a pretty big failure. We had to go back to the drawing board. Failure can feel devastating, but in the end, you can't have innovative success without it, but you have to be able to learn from it. We learned from that test, we learned from that failure, and we went on to create a better system. But we had to fail along the way to get there. Failure can feel devastating, and nobody wants it. The key is you have to fail forward, to learn from your mistakes. Fail, suck it up, and move on, but learn from those mistakes. Now, the last thing that I think is important for creating high-performing teams and allowing teams to be successful is that we have to be accountable. We have to practice accountable leadership. We need to hold our team accountable, but we also need to hold ourselves accountable. If we make a bad decision, if we make a mistake, we step up and we own it. By admitting mistakes, we show our team that it's okay to bring problems to the table. And then that way, they're more likely to bring small problems before they become big problems before the organization. But we have to be accountable. And we do that best in the flying community by conducting a debrief, an open and honest fighter pilot debrief. After my mission in Iraq, essentially a success in that I had landed the airplane safely, we weren't content with that. We had to figure out what we did wrong, what we could do better the next time. And so we do a debrief. We check our rank at the door so that the youngest members, me in this case, the least experienced, can provide feedback to the most experienced people in the flight. And then we share that information with our team. We talk about our objectives. What did we do well? But mostly, where did we fail? Where did we make mistakes? And then we figure out the root cause, come up with our lessons learned, and share that with our team. We focus on the suboptimal outcomes. We're not just giving ourselves a pat on the back about the great things we did. We focus on the suboptimal outcomes so that we can create a culture where we're constantly trying to improve and get better. And by doing that, we hold ourselves accountable. The debrief, that environment ensures that we're not so rigid, that we can't change, that we can remain flexible so that we're relevant in a competitive environment. But we have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to hold our team accountable. And accountable leadership is absolutely essential to high-performing teams. Now, on April 8th, the day after my mission in Baghdad, I got to sit Combat Search and Rescue Alert, CSAR, which means if a pilot gets shot down, we will do everything we can to go pick that pilot up. And our job as A-10 pilots was to coordinate the rescue. Well, it's April 8th, it's the day after this incredibly challenging mission, and I'm exhausted, and it's a chance, in most cases, to relax. Usually on CSAR Alert, we sit next to the ramp on the runway, we read, we sleep, we watch TV, and we relax. Not today. Today we get the call, the alarm sounds, it's not a drill, an A-10 pilot has been shot down in Baghdad. The alarm sounds, we race out to the jets, we get there as quickly as we can. The crew chiefs practically have them completely started before we even hop in. We hop in the jets, we start gathering information. Where is the pilot? What is his condition? What shot him down? We proceed about 30 minutes into Iraq, and we get the call, you can turn around. Turns out he's been picked up by friendly ground forces and he's in good hands. I never had time to think about the fact that I was going back to Baghdad, right back where I had escaped my own shoot down. Didn't matter. Why? Because a member of my team was on the ground. He needed my help, and I knew that those same guys had been there for me the day before. And I was going to do everything I could to get him out safely. Because that's what teams do. Now, as I look back on my 23 years of service, I think about what has been most rewarding, what has been most impactful. And when it comes down to it, it's the teams. The teams that I've been a part of and the teams that I have led. My brothers and sisters in arms. That's what matters. I will never forget the men and women that I have served with. Yes, there were challenges. I will not forget the challenges that we experienced in combat. But the bonds we made, the friendships, the camaraderie. That's what's important. Because when you have a team that's successful and that performs well, you can make a significant impact. And that impact matters. The best reward or award that I've ever received in my 23 years came from a soldier on the ground. He scribbled a note on a piece of paper and left it for me. And it said, "Thanks for saving our ass over Baghdad." That means more to me than anything else. That's what matters. Now, I know as cadets and young people here in the room, it's hard to imagine the challenges that you might face, the experiences that you might have. Believe me, 20 plus years ago, when I was sitting here in this room, I couldn't have fathomed the way that my career would go, the experiences that I would have. The key is we gotta be prepared. We gotta be ready for it. Because we will be faced with challenge, we will be faced with adversity, and we have to be able to be prepared to respond and excel when you are faced with the unexpected. You have tremendous opportunities ahead of you, and I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you very much.
Colonel Campbell, thank you for that incredible story and the message you gave us today. At this time, I would like to open up the floor for questions, and I'll be back out here as we approach 5 minutes remaining in the session. Thank you.
Stop pressing that clicker. It moves too fast. Hi.
Hello, ma'am. Cadet Collins from West Point. During your training, you gained experience and skills in yourself and your team, but I think your mission, what you went through, really exemplifies a lot of faith in your equipment as well. And you touched on a little bit when you went over how reliable the A-10 was. I was wondering, can you go into a little bit more about how your faith in your equipment and the A-10 allowed you to make the decision to stay in the aircraft rather than eject? Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, the A-10 was built to take hits. It was designed for a mission of close air support to get down low and support our troops on the ground. And so there are several redundant systems in the A-10. It has 2 engines. The wing tanks are enclosed in protective foam lining to prevent fire after battle damage. As a pilot, I sit in a titanium bathtub for protection against enemy fire. And so I knew that this airplane, I had confidence in this airplane because of that reliability, the redundancy that was set in the airplane. And so I felt very comfortable flying the airplane back. I mean, I had 300 miles an hour. The A-10's not very fast, you might know that. But I had an hour to figure it out, and I flew for an hour in it, and it felt good. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people that think I should have ejected, and that's okay. And sometimes it comes down to you in that moment, and you have to make the decision. Nobody else was flying it. Nobody else was going to do it for me. But I felt very confident in the design of that airplane, and I am thankful for all the people that designed and built the A-10 and who worked on the A-10, because they created an airplane that would keep us safe, but allow us to go do our mission to support the troops on the ground, because that's our bread and butter. That's what we do. That's what's most important.
Thank you, ma'am.
You bet.
Colonel Campbell, Cadet Third Class Rubio,
Hi, Will.
CS-25. I was wondering, as we start to move more towards the F-35 for close air support missions, obviously your mission and your story exemplifies the need for a durable aircraft that can kind of get and be the low and slow aircraft and provide cover for troops on the ground. Do you see a potential move to make a second iteration of the A-10 in the future to act as the future of close air support aircraft besides the F-35?
Sure. So, the A-10 has had kind of an up and down history of whether or not it's going to stick around. And kind of the latest information, and this is administration dependent, and, is that the A-10 will at least stick around through 2028, 2035. Obviously, there's some new discussions of light attack aircraft and options to potentially replace the A-10 down the road. But I will tell you that as an A-10 community, we hold so dearly that close air support mission that we have sent some of our best pilots to the F-35 community because we want that mission of close air support to excel. So even if the A-10 goes away, that mission won't go away. And that's why we're sending our best pilots to go do that, because we feel so strongly about the close air support mission that the aircraft doesn't really matter. We're gonna go get the job done anyway, because we have that connection with the guys on the ground.
Thank you, ma'am.
You bet.
Good morning, ma'am. Staff Sergeant Camille, FE Warren, EOD. When we talk about PTSD, not only in the Air Force, but DOD-wide, it hits our community pretty hard. If a team lead goes down, the team member is expected to attempt to save the life of the team leader and then move on with the mission. After your experience and the next day having to face a second mission, how as a leader would you recommend other leaders deal with PTSD within their troops?
I will tell you that getting in the airplane in the way I did the next day was probably the best way it could have happened, because I didn't have time to think about it. I just reacted. I got in the airplane. I didn't think about what was happening. So for me, that was really effective. I got it out of the way of flying again. And I will tell you that the follow-on missions, it was still tough. It was tough to fly over Baghdad again. I ended up transitioning to nights, and then I realized they were shooting at us all the time. We just didn't see it. And so for me, continuing on with the mission is what helped me, because it was so important to go do what we do to support the troops on the ground that I kind of just pushed everything out of my mind. I don't know if that's the best way to deal with it. It worked in those moments, and I think I didn't really come to grips with everything that had happened and kind of those moments of fear and terror. I mean, even when I came back into the squadron, actually to the chow hall after the mission, I remember people came up to me and asked if I was scared. I was like, no, I wasn't scared. I just, I had to respond. There was nobody else to do it. I wasn't scared. And then I went and listened to my video, and I have probably a few cadets in here that have seen the video, and they can attest that my voice and the octave is much higher, and so clearly I was scared. And combat can be terrifying at moments, but it's about what you do in those moments that matter. And I think what really helped me was my brothers and sisters who were there for me, that welcomed me back, that asked me how I was doing, that knew that it had to be tough. And because we had those bonds and had that time together, being able to share with them was really important. And then I got the opportunity to come home and share with my family as well. And my parents are sitting here today. I have no idea how it is for them to hear this story again, because I woke them up in the middle of the night in California because my squadron commander told me I should call and let them know that I was okay. A 1 a.m. phone call in the middle of the night from your daughter who's flying missions in Iraq is, I don't know how settled they felt after that. And all I could say was that I was okay. But having a family that supported me, my husband is also active duty, so he understood, and just really having an entire team around me. So I know that's a long answer to your short question, but we just need to know that people are impacted different ways, and people respond in different ways. So we got to give them a little bit of space to understand how they will best react. But for me, it was getting back into the mission and being around my brothers and sisters and having that support, and knowing that I was making a difference in what I was doing and that the risk was worth it.
Thank you, ma'am.
You bet.
Good morning, ma'am. Midshipman Andrew Gould from the University of Illinois Naval ROTC. You mentioned the importance of practicing vulnerability and accountability in your leadership and being open to uncertainty and risk. And I just was wondering if you could go a little bit more in depth to that. How do you do that on a daily basis when you interact with your airmen, your fellow officers, the people that you work with every day? How do you build that trust through vulnerability and accountability, just so you can have that togetherness and that high-performing team?
Yeah, so I think they balance each other out a little bit in that on a daily basis as a squadron commander or group commander, it's getting out and talking with your team and getting to know them. And you don't have to act in a way that you think you should. You should just go out and act in a way that is you and not try to be something you're not. I had these visions of, what a squadron commander would look like, what a group commander should be. And those are things to attain for, but in the end, I'm me. I have strengths, I have weaknesses. It's not about like going out and sharing all your weaknesses with everybody. It's just, you set boundaries and what you share with people, but you have an opportunity to just kind of connect with your team, get to know them, let them know who you are, and establish that trust. It's a little bit of back and forth. It doesn't happen overnight. This is over time. You got to get out of your office. You got to get out and connect with your team, get to know them, and I think that's kind of the daily basis. But when your team brings ideas to you, you got to let them know that their ideas are valued, and encourage them, and encourage that creativity, encourage the innovation, and encourage the young members to bring ideas forward. And so it's a lot about how you interact with your team, and then when people do bring those ideas to you, show them that they're valued, show that they're important. I'm not trying to be friends with my team here, right? I'm still the boss, I'm still in charge, and I'm still the leader. And that's where the accountability piece comes in, right? So I hold myself accountable, I hold my team accountable, and we draw the line. But it's not an overnight thing. This is something that you have to practice over time. And again, I think you establish trust first, and you do that by connections and getting out and talking to your team, valuing their expertise, right? My airmen that I was in charge of were firefighters and lawyers and doctors, and that wasn't my background, that wasn't my expertise. They were logisticians and vehicle maintenance, and I trusted their expertise. I got to know them. I drove a front loader in Guantanamo because my civil engineers wanted to teach me how to drive it, and I let the youngest airman teach me how to do that. Those little things like that, it makes a difference. So it's not an easy overnight. It's a constant development with your team.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, Cadet 3rd Class Thompson, Squadron 29. During the time period of your event, women weren't authorized to serve in all combat roles. Mm-hmm. Did this ever affect you in your mission or as an A-10 pilot?
I decided I wanted to be a fighter pilot well before women were allowed in combat. I didn't know. I had no idea. I told my parents one day that I wanted to be an astronaut. We kind of came up with this plan and talked to my dad. My dad is an academy grad, and I decided in those moments that I was going to go to the academy, I was going to be a fighter pilot, and that was what I wanted to do. I had no idea that women weren't allowed to fly fighters. My parents never told me. They didn't tell me to take up something new. They just said, all right, let's get you prepared to go to the academy. So I had no idea that women weren't allowed to fly fighters. It didn't even occur to me. And by the time I had graduated the academy, combat aircraft were open to women. So it really never impacted me that way. I certainly felt the impact of being probably the only female in a fighter squadron for several years. But flying in combat, it really was never apparent to me other than the fact that it seemed people were surprised when I would come on the radio, or especially talking with the ground guys, they would be surprised when they'd hear a female voice over the radio. Really what it comes down to, though, is credibility. And if you can do your job and get the mission done, then nobody cared. Nobody cared. I mean, there was lots of curiosity about it. I got asked all the time, what's the hardest part about being a female in a fighter squadron? And my answer was always, and will still be, the hardest thing is going to the bathroom in the airplane, period. It is just not an easy thing to do, right? I won't get into the details, don't worry about it. But that's it, right? The rest of it is just credibility. And so I truly didn't, I guess in a good way, never really understood all the difficulties and challenges and that women weren't allowed in these positions because women had come before me. Yes, I was a minority, but I just had a job to do, and I was going to go get it done. And that took care of everything else. And those guys in my squadron were my brothers. They looked out for me. I know they had my back, and they supported me in everything.
Thank you, Pam.
You bet.
I am Dave Carmack. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, retired Air Force, and in active clinical practice now. Your comment about the power of the debrief, I just didn't want to let that one get away because in healthcare, we didn't always have that, and we kind of brought that over from the aviation and the military, frankly, and that has been a game changer. So I just thought maybe you could comment on further of the power of the debrief, and I've personally found that it really takes a good leader to run a good debrief, because otherwise, you know, you have to keep quiet and let the most junior people kind of speak up and speak against you, actually.
Absolutely. The debrief is incredibly important. I think it translates not just to the military and flying community, but to the business community, to life as well, right? Occasionally my husband and I have debriefs about how we handled something with our children. I mean, this applies everywhere. It's kind of, you know, what was your objective, your target, your goal, and did you achieve it? And if not, then why? And you got to go look. And, you know, we spend an awful lot of time sometimes talking about how great we did. You know, we pat each other on the back and say what a great mission, and then we kind of forget all the small details. And so when we debrief, we look at all of those details. In the flying community, we review film, we look at parameters. If we're off by a degree, we talk about it, how to get better, so that we're just not content with being, you know, close enough or good enough. It's all about how to get yourself to that next level, how to perform exceptionally well. And so that debrief is those moments, and you have to have trust first, because otherwise the younger, least experienced people will not speak up. They'll be afraid to speak up. They'll be afraid to give that feedback, and that's why we don't take it personal. It's not personal. It's just trying to make everybody better. And so part of it, you're right, is how the leader leads the debrief. We're not pointing fingers and saying, you suck today. We're saying, hey, you made a few mistakes. Let's talk about how we do that better the next time. And we have the tough conversations. And sometimes that's the flight lead that made a mistake. I took us down the wrong route. You know, we got shot at by an SA-6 today, and that's on me as the leader. I had a bad plan. And so it is definitely about how the leader holds the debrief, but it's a focus on our objectives. So we have to have clear objectives first, and then we go back and evaluate those objectives. We figure out what went wrong, where we want to focus. We identify the primary cause, and then the key thing is you can't just leave it there. You got to have a lesson learned. And as much as you learn that lesson, then you have to take action on it. It does us no good if we just have a list of lessons learned and we do nothing with them. We have to take action. And that means you share it outside just the immediate debrief team. You share it with everybody else. And that's hard sometimes, because sometimes the mistakes and the things that people do poorly, that's where we all learn the best from. And so we've done that fairly well in the flying community, and a lot of times it happens with accidents and things. We'll go debrief those and figure it out so that it doesn't happen again. I think it translates very well to the medical community as well. Thank you.
Colonel Campbell, thank you again for sharing your experience and wisdom with us.
Thank you.
On behalf of our 2020 NCLS participants, the Cadet Wing, and the faculty and staff of the Air Force Academy, we would like to present you with a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you.